This is a production of Cornell University.
Good evening and welcome to the last of the summer series. This is a special bonus and I'm glad to have all of you here. Please silence all of your electronic devices. And I also want to thank Catherine Boer, the Dean of the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, for the use of this hall. She has been very generous this year. In the United States, one possible way to find out if you've made it is to check with The Simpsons. 11 years ago, Lisa Simpson dreamed she was in prison. And when a guard came around with a book cart, she asked, "Got any Joyce Carol Oates?" The guard replied, "Nope, it's all Danielle Steele." Does anyone know how Lisa responded? Do you remember that? Okay, go look it up. But it gets even better. In 2017, in an episode, Pork and Burns, Joyce actually appears as herself and even voices her own character. But we're at Cornell, and for us, The Simpsons doesn't count as a particularly reliable and reputable source of anything. So let's look at a far better one. In the essay Reflecting on Joyce Carol Oates, Joanne Crichton, an English professor, former president of Mount Holyoke College, and the author of 2 books and many reviews and articles about the work of Joyce Carol Oates, reflected. While Joyce Carol Oates was early called the Dark Lady of American letters, that label is not right. She has a tremendous respect for the dark side of human experience, for the mysterious depth of the conscious, and for the primitive brutality at the core of physical existence. Yet Joyce's vision is not dark. She is in fact optimistic about the possibilities of human resilience and transcendence of a distinctly American variety. Despite the violence and duress that her characters typically endure, Joyce respects their tenacious attempt to, as she wrote in the preface to Mara, forge their own souls by way of the choices they make, large and small, conscious and half-conscious. Professor Crichton continues, but she sprints far ahead of those who would attempt to assess her body of work. I agree with Ann Tyler, who was quoted in a Washington Post article as saying, 100 years from now, people will laugh at us for sort of taking her for granted. Professor Crichton then finishes, this we know, she is one of the most accomplished and significant American writers of our time. The dictionary definitions of the words productive and prolific surely must have after them these words, as exemplified by Joyce Carol Oates. By my likely incomplete count, she has published at least 60 novels, 11 novellas, 42 collections of short stories, 10 children's and young adult novels, 8 plays, and 6 one-act plays, and 11 collections of poetry. She has also written hundreds of essays and book reviews, in addition to longer nonfiction works on literary subjects ranging from Emily Dickinson's poetry and the fiction of Dostoevsky and James Joyce to studies of the Gothic and horror genres, and on such non-literary subjects as the painter George Bellows and boxer Mike Tyson. How does she do this? I've read, and she'll correct me if I'm wrong, but that she writes daily in longhand from 8 a.m. to noon, and then she resumes her writing in the evening. Joyce is a native New Yorker who attended the same one-room school her mother did. While a student at Syracuse University, where she majored in English and was valedictorian of her class, she won the college short story contest sponsored by Mademoiselle magazine. Some years ago, one of her SU professors, Donald A. Dyke, commented that about once a term she'd drop a 400-page novel on my desk. He added, she was the most brilliant student we've ever had here. Joyce earned a Master of Arts in English from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. She has won many, many awards. She still runs, and she is an active hiker and bicyclist. And she is the Roger S. Berlin 52 Professor of the Humanities Emeritus and Professor of Creative Writing Emeritus at Princeton University. Joyce Carol Oates was last here 9 years and 361 days ago, and it is a genuine pleasure to have her with us again tonight. Joyce.
Oh, thank you for that gracious introduction. I sat there sort of holding my breath, wondering what he would say next. I don't remember writing 400,000 books or whatever that was. It makes a person feel somewhat posthumous. Sometimes I sort of look around and thinking, is this actually the other world? And I've sort of crossed over. No, it's Ithaca. It's upstate New York. It's not the other world. Well, I'm very excited tonight because I'm going to read some new work that I've never read before, so I have no idea how this is going to go over. The title of my talk, lecture, which is the most soporific word there is in our vocabulary, I had to give a title for my lecture tonight, so I call it The Other You. I have a collection of short stories, the next one that will be published, which is like the 4,000th collection of my short stories ever done. And that's called The Other You, with parenthesis around the word other. I think as we live our lives, we constantly take turns and make decisions, and we go this direction, we might have gone this way, and there are all these alternative selves that sort of lie behind us. We might not have gone to a certain place at a certain time, therefore we might not have met the person we fell in love with and got married and maybe had children with, so there's all that life that actually happened. But then the latent lives, the lives that we didn't live, I think are sort of almost equally palpable in some imaginative way. And some people probably did not choose the right life, and so their real life, the deepest self, is back in some other direction. So I've been writing this sequence of stories that have to do with alternative selves. So tonight I will read some poetry, a prose poem, and a short story. But I won't ask you to try to distinguish between them. I'll tell you which is which. And they all sort of turn upon the idea of there being an alternative self that might be you, but maybe a more pure self. It may not be a more pure self, but it's a different you, and it may express yourself in some ways that are startling and original, but somehow truer to you. So I think many of us start to live lives that are compromises and they're not really the true lives. If you meet someone and you fall in love, or you think you fall in love, you get married before it's too late, it's actually too late and you've embarked upon a different life. So the first poem I'm going to read is 6 lines long, and you can't see it, of course, but poets put a lot of importance upon white spaces. So there are 2 stanzas of 3 lines, and it's sort of balanced that way. I wrote this poem in a kind of trance after the 2016 election. It's called Exsanguination, meaning bleeding out. Exsanguination. Life as it unspools evermore eludes examination. We wonder what is best, exsanguination in a rush or in 1,000 small slashes. And like many poets, I'm sort of in love with strange rhymes. This next poem is called Hometown Waiting for You, and here the you person is somebody who seems to have left his or her hometown, has gone away to some other place, and has made a kind of, quote, success. But the hometown people, like the people you went to high school with in middle school, they're still back there waiting for you. They're waiting for you to die. They're waiting for you to come back to them, like there's this huge graveyard, hometown waiting for you. And for those of us from upstate New York who have not been back in a while, it's particularly terrifying to think of the hometown waiting for you. So this is the voice of the hometown. Hometown waiting for you. All these decades we've been waiting here for you. Welcome. You do look lonely. No one knows you the way we know you, and you know us. Did you actually once tell yourself, I am better than this? One day actually tell yourself, I deserve better than this. Fact is, you couldn't escape us, and we have been waiting for you. Welcome home. Boasting how a scholarship bore you away like a chariot of the gods, except where you were born, your soul remains. We all die young here. Not one of us outlived young here. Check out obituaries in the Lockport Union Sun and Journal. Car crash, overdose. Gunshot, fire, cancers of breast, ovaries, lung, colon. Heart attack, cirrhosis of liver, assault, battery, stroke, and did I say overdose? Car crash? Filling up the cemeteries here, plastic trash here, styrofoam here. 3/4 of your 7th grade class now in urns, ash. Those flashy cars you have given your soul to ride in just once, now eyeless, rusting hulks in tall grass. Those eyes you'd wish might crawl upon you like ants in graveyards of broken glass. Atwater Park, where you'd wept in obscure shame, and now, whatever his name, who trampled your heart, he's ash. Proud as hell of you, though, we admit, we never read a goddamn word you've written. We never forgave you. We hate winners. Still, it's not too late. Did I say overdose? Why otherwise are you here? Kind of nasty person. I'm glad I'm not back in Lockport. Oh, did I say Lockport? The last time I went back to Lockport, it was kind of terrifying. It had all bleached of all its color, and it was like a sepia photograph of it, like 1951. Some people are nodding. I guess you know Lockport. Some people actually know Lockport, New York. Oh. Anyway, it's terrifying place. Now, the next piece I'm going to read is a little more serious, and here the other self is an experimental subject in a very famous psychology experiment of 1920. So those of you who have taken Introduction to Psychology, you have seen this film. It's a shameful example of what we would call today scientific malpractice. But in 1920, there were no ethical guidelines for scientific research. This is called Little Albert. Perhaps that name means something to you. Little Albert, 1920. This is a very famous, one of the very first behavioral psychological experiments that became really like the foundation of a certain kind of experimental psychology. John Watson, the father of behaviorism, is the experimenter in this poem. B.F. Skinner was one of his proteges, who was at Harvard in subsequent years. My late husband, Charlie Gross, who had a degree from Harvard, actually studied with B.F. Skinner. So it was a kind of like handshake going back here to the infamous John Watson. So little Albert was an infant at the time of this experiment. And many of you have already seen the videos or the little films of little Albert. And you can Google little Albert if you wish to. This is little Albert speaking, and he speaks in stanzas, delineating this experiment. which is a classic. Little Albert, 1920. I was little Albert, 9 months old in the famous film, and a white cotton nightie on a lab table sitting upright facing a camera. Remember me? Sure, you do. First, you saw that I was a curious baby. You saw that I blinked and stared with all the intensity of an infant brain, eager to suck into its galaxy of neurons all of the world. You saw that I was you. You saw that I was a fearless baby. You saw I was not frightened of a burning newspaper held before me at alarmingly close range, though indeed my rapt infant face expressed the classic wariness of our race. Next, you saw that I was not frightened of a frisky monkey darting close about me on a leash. You saw I was not frightened by a large dog brought close to me, nor by a quivering rabbit, nor a small white rat, nor even a Santa Claus mask worn by a menacing male figure, clad in white, shoved close to my infant face. You saw that I was attracted to the small white rat. You saw I reached out to pet the small white rat. And as I reached for the small white rat, behind my head came an explosion of noise. The shock of it sent me sprawling, cringing, face contorted in terror, mouth a perfect O of anguish, howling, as the experimenter John Watson struck a metal pipe with a hammer. What a shock! How terror rushed through me! How desperately I crawled to escape, almost toppling off the edge of the table, except adult hands restrained me. Then this is in the italics. Children naturally fear loud noises. Children naturally fear surprises. Children naturally fear the unknown. Children can be taught to fear the unknown. The second experiment was 1 month later. No escape for me, for I was little Albert. Grim as a little gargoyle in a white cotton nightie, able to sit upright, though now weary and distrustful. No joy in my little body as, again, a small white rat was introduced to me. You saw how this time I shrank away, how this time there was terror in my face, how this time I did not reach with infant eagerness for the small white rat, for I learned to hate and fear the small white rat. And again you saw how the very presence of the small white rat precipitated a deafening clamor as John Watson another time struck a metal pipe with a hammer, again, and again behind my head. For who was there to stop him? In this way, establishing on film how baseless fear can be instilled in a subject where fear had not previously existed, and how memory of this baseless fear will endure contained in the unfathomable brain. How I cried and cried, as if I had known that my mother had received but $1 for the use of me in John Watson's psych lab in the experiment that would destroy me and make John Watson famous. For in the alchemy of my brain, my fear of a small white rat had become generalized, and now, as Watson demonstrated, I feared the monkey, the dog, the rabbit equally, though each was not accompanied by a clanging hammer. Now I fear the menacing figure in the Santa Claus mask, as if understanding that Santa Claus was my tormentor. Cried and could not be consoled. Even a woman's fur coat terrified me, for how could I trust softness? Sudden movements, sounds behind my head, the unexpected. These are italics. Classic Pavlovian conditioning, bedrock of behavioral psychology, brilliant pioneer, John Watson. You are wondering, did John Watson decondition me? No, he did not. Did another experimental psychologist decondition me? No, he did not. Ask me what was the remainder of my life. Ask me, did I adjust to life after the infamous experiment? Ask me, did I overcome my terror of animals? The answer is not known, for I died at age 6. All this was long ago. Things are different now. John Watson would not be allowed to terrorize little Albert in his famous experiment now. Ours is an ethical age. Or was it all a bad dream? Were you deceived? Oh, you were little Albert. You were conditioned to fear and hate. You were conditioned to thrust from you what you were meant to love. Or you were the victim. You were the experimental subject. You were little Albert who died young. Let's say a few more words about John Watson and B.F. Skinner. They really became so important to American culture because the whole idea feeds right into advertising, consumer manipulation, and to political manipulation, making people terrified of subjects that in themselves would not warrant terror, making people hate and fear that which they were meant to love or whatever. And so it fits right in with a certain kind of deranged democracy and political manipulation, behavioral psychology. Now the story I'm going to read, I should give you a trigger warnings. I'm not sure whether you have trigger warnings at Cornell. I was just someplace where there was an issue of freedom of speech, of freedom of expression that collided with other people's feelings that they were upset or made uncomfortable. So this story might make some people uncomfortable. I don't know what to do about that. So I'll just give you a trigger warning that if you are a good, decent, civilized person, you probably won't like this story. You'll probably be upset by this story. So if you're a really good person and sort of decent and civilized and so forth and sane and all that, it's maybe going to be upsetting. But on the other hand, maybe not. This story is called Assassin, and the person who's telling it again is not me. You know, I really, the other you means that I don't have to take any responsibility for all these different things. This person is definitely not me. We know because this is set in some country, not the United States. I wrote this in a great trance of inspiration when I was in Dublin about a year ago. I attended, I guess I might have given one of the main presentations at the Dublin Ghost Story Festival. So there were a lot of ghosts and weird things there, and I was there. And I remember, I think maybe just one other American, and everybody else was English or Scottish or Irish. Lots of Irish and English are sort of the main ghost story writers. There are reasons why Britain is sort of friendly toward ghosts and weird things. And I have to say, I wrote this a year ago because there's a character in here who is called the PM. And now he just seems like the new prime minister of I don't know how this happened. When I wrote this, Theresa May was totally antithetical to this, so it was purely fiction. But now it almost looks as if I'd written this story about this Boris Johnson, and I hope he doesn't know about it, and I hope he doesn't want to do something awful. But I'm telling you right here, and maybe I'll get back to him, that I actually wrote it a long time ago. I wrote it like 20 years ago. Assassin, hissing sound like snakes, first came to me through the steam radiator, waking open-mouthed at the inside of my mouth raw and festering from what had been done to it while I'd been made to sleep, or drugged to sleep in this terrible place. Then the whisper of hope, assassin. The room I was assigned at St. Clement House, this was the first insult. This was unforgivable. The room, the bed with a lumpy, smelly mattress on the high floor of the house. Had to climb stairs with my swollen ankles, wait, panting like a dog. Had to make my way along the winding corridor like a rat in a maze. Insult at my age. Pre-diabetic was the diagnosis. Hypertension. To be assigned such sleeping quarters in a bloody attic, low ceiling, no privacy, I would have to share a drippy Dreary, dripping lavatory with strangers, it was not fair or just. St. Clement House, where residents are the staff and the staff are residents. You will look out for one another, they told us. Smug bastards, all of them. There are paid nurses' aide attendants, but not many of these, and so we all obliged to assist one another, unpaid when required. Dr. Schumacher is the resident psychologist, but Dr. S does not reside in the house and does not linger in the house any longer than is necessary, for the bastard is clear of us by 5 p.m. and on his way. I was meant to be an equal of Dr. S, for I am educated, but was cheated in my destiny by reason of my sex, female. Also unacknowledged enemies in the government. After my discharge from the hospital, where I was kept against my volition for 6 months, deemed not ready to return to normal life and so sentenced to a halfway house, as it is laughably called. And now the worst insult to be assigned to one of the 5th floor dormer rooms, where at 53 I am old enough to be the grandmother of most of the residents. And I am not a junkie or a souse. I am not gaga like some. I am not a filthy slut, hardly, but forced to cohabit with such crippled specimens of humanity for the sake of a bed and food to eat until I am well enough again to live by myself and tend to my own needs. My only friend does not live here. My dear friend, like a sister I have known since St. Agatha's grade school, is Pris Riance, who is my age and stout like me, and with a plain, honest face like raw bread dough. When I am well enough again, Pris Riance has said I might live with her in a room in her house if I could pay just a few dollars a week. It is very surprising. Pris Riance is a cleaning woman for the PM himself. Would you believe it? Yet so, 30 years, Pris Riance has worked for the same cleaning service that is assigned to the PM's residence at Queen Square. But if you ask the woman what the PM is like, she will blink and stammer and seem not to know. Guess I don't see much of him or any of them. A dull female, not like me. Well, I'd known that Pris Riance cleaned the PM's residence and had done so for many years, but it never struck me much until the other day, waking like I did, stunned and swallowing, not knowing at first where the hell I was, hissing in the radiator. Assassin. I love the sound of that word, assassin. Not killer, not murderer, those are common words, not even executioner. There was something about this word I'm beginning to admire. Assassin, executioner, in the service of fairness and justice. The insult of my room on the 5th floor and how we are fed there, in this half-arsed halfway house. Cold, gluey oatmeal one morning, and when I spat out a mouthful on my spoon, disgusted to see what resembled a small wizened piece of meat. Your own heart, the whisper came to me, laughing. Yet the idea of assassination did not occur to me for some time. I have lost track of the days since that time, but it might have been a month at least. What began in the hissing in a dream and spread out of the dream like a potato, sprouting roots in dank soil. Assassin. Somehow it came to me that I would saw off the head of the arrogant bastard PM. This would be my destiny, not the other, not to be Dr. S and lord it over the mentally enfeebled addicts and sluts, for I've been cheated of that career. But this I would not be cheated of, and will go down in history like the Hebrew Jews in their triumph of the Holophonies. Assassin, assassin. I was slow to realize and to accept as you would be if you won a lottery and did not dare to believe. Have I won? The winner is me? Almost I could hear the crowds applauding on the TV. Hateful, arrogant son of a bitch the PM was, you saw clearly on TV. A bachelor he was, never married. No worse than any of them in any of the political parties, but the PM is a top dog, deserving of his bloody head sawed off. And fitting the very person who scrubbed his filthy toilet should be the one to saw it off. You see, no one notices us. That would be our revenge. Squat, short, middle-aged female like Pris Riance, me, moves through the world invisible. She, I, have bunions, varicose veins, swollen ankles. She, I, are short of breath, making our way upstairs. Hell, we are short of breath, making our way downstairs. Not 5'3", 175 pounds. No one has glanced at us in decades. Not a man or a boy in memory. We are deserving of respect as any of you, yet we do not receive your bloody respect, so bloody hell with you. In fact, this is our strength. an assassin in the figure of a middle-aged cleaning woman, flush-faced and panting on the stairs, breasts like balloons collapsed to her waist, fatty thighs and buttocks in a nylon uniform. Who'd suspect? What, are you daft, man, that cow? That's the cleaning woman, for Christ's sake, man, let her through. Something like this it was that transpired that morning. Very cleverly, I ground up a half-dozen sleeping pills to dissolve in Rience's coffee, which the woman so dilutes with cream and sugar. It's not even coffee any longer. And they're trying to say to me that I'm the one who's pre-diabetic. And so there was no difficulty for me to put on Pris Rience's uniform when she was fast asleep and snoring with her vast mouth agape. And indeed, the stretch-waist nylon trousers fitted me like a fist in a glove. No difficulty for me to impersonate Pris Rience, who was near enough to me to be a twin sister. So that even if a security guard had thought to actually look at me, he'd have seen Pris Rience and not me, for it was Pris Rience's photo ID pinned to my bosom, slumping to my waist, and he would not have given that ID photo a second glance, either out of repugnance for that sort of female bosom. Also, Pris Rience wore an insipid knitted cap, which suited me too. Okay, ma'am, go on through. If a man does glance at you, if you are Pris Rience or me, his eyes are glazed with boredom. Not for an instant does he see. Waves through security without a hitch, exactly as planned. Dragging a vacuum cleaner on wheels, mop and bucket, canvas bag in which was stuffed sundry cloths, brushes, and cleaning materials. From innocent queries posed to Pris Rience, I had ascertained which corridor to take into the PM's private rooms. And there swiftly I left behind the cleaning items and sought out the bloody bastard in the swanky interior, for whom I was feeling a fierce hatred, as if in a dream of the night before the PM had insulted me to my face, as so many others have done. You would be surprised, as I was, how swiftly I moved on my swollen ankles, which would make me realize, in reflecting back over the episode, how the assassination was a foregone conclusion, like a final move in a chess game, except until just recently the assassin had not been named. And I would wonder if they had sought out others as the assassin in this case, and these others had proved inferior. And so they had settled upon me with the knowledge that I would not disappoint. For they must have known of me, by previous life, by education that had come to nothing, the sharpness of my intelligence blunted by the myriad disappointments, of which not a single one was my fault. In a man's bedroom in his black silk stocking feet, there the PM stood before a three-way mirror frowning as he buttoned a crisp iron white cotton shirt with his back to the door unsuspecting. For Pris Rience would never have dared enter any room in the residence without knocking meekly beforehand. And if there was no knock, there could be no intrusion. If no intrusion by a stranger, there could be no sudden blow to the head from behind, no swift rushing into the penumbra of the mirror. There was no chance for the targeted one to draw a breath, to escape the hard blow of a pewter urn selected from a mantel, fairly cracking the eggshell skull in that moment. You will know what to do as you do it. The hissing voice had instructed out of the radiator, and so it was. In an adjoining kitchen there were fancy sharp knives on the magnet board, and of these I selected a knife with a double serrated blade, and for the next half hour or more I was engaged in sawing off the head of the bloody PM as he lay helpless on the floor on a fancy thick-piled carpet. This career politician, as he was known, who had so many enemies in our country, any number of them would rejoice in my actions and thank me for my patriotism. To sever a living head from a living body is no easy task, and it is very bloody and tiring, as you might imagine, but the PM was deeply unconscious from the blow to his skull and put up little resistance. The head, that's capital H now, the head, as I would call it, was mine as soon as the head was cleanly severed from the body. It was larger than you would think. It was heavier and very bloody, with veins and sinews and twitchy nerves dripping nonstop from the ragged neck. And the skin of the face was coarse and darkening, as was chagrin. And the eyes were half shut, droopy-lidded like a drunkard's. And the hair, which was thin and grizzled gray, and not a handsome whitey silver such as you are accustomed to see on the PM in his public appearances, a hairpiece, which evidently the PM would fix upon his head when he left his quarters. "Missing your hairpiece, are you, love?" The wisecrack issued from my lips. I wondered if this would be a new trait of mine, a coquettish sort of wit. For it was very unlike my usual self in the presence of men, I can testify, almost the kind of sharp wit you encounter on TV. The head was too stunned to respond. Of the eyes, the left had all but disappeared inside its socket, while the right was trying very hard to fix me in focus, to determine what was what. For the PM had not gotten to his position in the government without being sharp-witted. Out of kindness as much as mischief, I sought out the hairpiece in an adjoining bathroom, and this I placed upon the near bald scalp and adjusted as best I could, for even in his decapitated state, the PM was something of a ladies' man. Almost you have to smile to register a man's vanity at such a time. Soon then I would exit the PM's chambers trailing vacuum cleaner, mop and bucket, and canvas bag. And in the bag, wrapped in plastic to prevent the blood from soaking through, the head, and a dollop of disinfectant to make the nostrils pinch. Leaving the PM's residence, you are not scrutinized. There is only precaution against bringing a deadly instrument into the residence, and when you exit, it's by a different door. Not a one of them so much as glanced in my friendly direction. Not even Perseverance's glamour hat drew any attention. Still, it was early, not yet 8 a.m. If they had their wits about them, they might have wondered why the cleaning woman was leaving so early, but indeed they took no more notice of her than of a fly buzzing to be let out. From Perseverance, I knew that the shiny black limousine to bear the PM across town to the Capitol building would not appear until 8:30 a.m., and so no one would miss the deceased until then. The headless body I left covered with a quilt from the disheveled bed. Being headless, a body is of not much interest, and interchangeable with others of its sex, seemed to me. In Perseverance's rubber-soled shoes, with Perseverance's ID photo removed from my bosom, and a coarse knit nylon cardigan of an unusual shade of lavender that resembled nothing of hers and nothing of mine, and the insipid cap removed, I took the Land's End trolley to the end of the line. There is a place here I know that I have not visited in years, but I'd once known well, down behind a boardwalk by the beach, in an area of the beach that is no longer much frequented, and here the head would not be easily discovered. My plan was to bury it in a coarse, damp sand with care, for this part of the assassination seemed to be left to me to devise. As it often happens, a know-it-all will instruct you what to do, but neglect to include the complete instructions, so you must supply them yourself. Women are familiar with this, and not surprising to me. The head comprehended my plan, for the right eye was fixed upon me with alarm, though luridly bloodshot, that eye was sharp focused. "Don't abandon me," it begged. Such nonsense. I wasn't going to listen to such nonsense. In life, the PM had a wheedling way about him that was often remarked upon. A right proper bastard, the PM. 1 quart of Scots blood, it was said of him. One of those sly ones who would get his bloody way if you were not careful. So I hid the head in a safe-keeping place behind a shuttered stall. Still in the canvas bag, it was but so grimy a bag, and the most desperate eyes not worth stealing. By this time I was very hungry, and so went out to have a snack on the boardwalk. Pork scratchings, Cornish pastry, a jammy and a Greg's sausage roll, tea cake, fish and chips. Then I returned, and there inside the bag was the head flush-faced and chagrined, and the left eye adrift, but the right eye blinking in the harsh oceanside light and accusing. "Don't abandon me. Please, your secret is safe with me. I will not tell them what you've done." And most piteous, "Don't bury me like garbage, I beg you." The head most feared being buried alive. I took pity on the head, for I could understand how it felt in such circumstances. In a few days I would come to a decision, I thought. In the meantime, the head is doing no harm. We are in a sheltered place where there is no one to hear it, and it cannot escape, of course. I have set it on a platter with some moisture beneath to keep it moist, as you would keep a succulent plant moist now the bleeding had stopped, or mostly stopped. Atop the scalp I have affixed a silvery hairpiece, as the head is anxious not to be seen without it. Soon the head has become a familiar presence, like a husband of many years. Once I'd had a husband, I think I remember this, but not this actual man, and not myself as a wife, I don't remember. Please have pity on me. Please love me. Don't bury me, the head dares to whisper, and kiss my lips, I love you, please. Oh, but at this request, I just laugh. I will not kiss your lips, or anyone's bloody lips. I'm calculating where to bury you, in fact. Farther out the pebbly shore, but deep enough so the gulls don't smell you and dig you up and cause a ruckus. No, I'm too smart for that. Fact is, I'm just sitting here having a rest, and I'm thinking, and when I'm finished thinking, I will know more clearly what to do, and I'm not taking bloody orders from you, my man, or from any man ever again. Well, I'm not really sure why you're clapping for that, but that's very nice. Anyway, I wrote it a year ago before Boris Johnson was. So I'm going to conclude with a funny poem, since I've been reading tragic material. And this sets out to be actually funny, so people would just sit there very stern and silent. I know you sit like this if I tell you that it's meant to be funny. Several years ago, the New Yorker had the New Yorker Festival, and they had a special panel that was dogs versus cats. We cat people sort of knew the fix was in and that the dogs would win because I think David Remnick favored dogs, and it was just really, really, really unfair. The cat people, each team had about 4 people. The cat people were extremely superior to the dog people. And I was on the cat team, of course, and I read this poem. And on the cat team was this wonderful person who breeds Bengal cats. I wonder if any of you even saw that presentation in New York City several years ago. Anyway, the cat breeder brought 2 Bengal kittens. And, just showing a Bengal kitten to the audience, immediately the cat team should have won with that. These Bengal kittens were enormously beautiful, and they were very tame, and they're kind of looking around, and just really, really beautiful. Anyway, so he was on my team, and there was Jerry Coyne, the biologist, who has a very popular Twitter, he has a Twitter account, he also has a blog. Jerry Coyne, a biologist, who would know more than a biologist that cats are superior to dogs. So my poem is based upon a very famous 18th century poem by Christopher Smart, For I Will Consider My Cat Geoffrey, Jubilate. They said that Christopher Smart was a lunatic, and they put him in a lunatic asylum. I don't think it has anything necessarily to do with cats. I'm not sure why he was in a lunatic asylum. I think it was unfair. I feel like this woman in my story, the assassin, like this, everything is unfair, and she's mistreated, and it's not her fault. So anyway, this poem is quite long, but at the same time, it may seem longer than it actually is, because some lines are only one word. Jubilate and homage in cattaro verse. Cattaro is a word that I made up. It's an elevated variant of doggerel. Doggerel is a lesser kind of cattaro. An homage in cattaro verse. For I will consider my cat Cherie, for she is the very apotheosis of cat beauty, which is to say nothing extraordinary. For in a cat, beauty is ordinary, like the bliss conferred upon us in hypnosis of purring. She has been known to knead her claws upon a sleeve and on a knee and on bare skin, sharp claws sinking in, just a warning. For she is of the tribe of tiger and eyes burning bright, though cuddling at night until you wait to discover, where is she, Cherie? Don't inquire. For in considering my cat Cherie, I am considering catitude, each cat the essential equivalent of all others, not varying freakishly in size like crude D*GS. There's some words that we don't print out. I have, on my Twitter account, I have never fully printed out the name of. Anyway, the point is that the cats are more or less all the same size, and they don't vary freakishly like crude D, ester, G. But pleasingly platonic. Cat chutzpah is the sheath claw, no heart born upon a foreleg, but you're challenged to decode like poetry of a subtlety that does not bark its meaning, but forces us to be just a little smarter than we are. Unlike D, asterisk, GS, whose uncritical adulation makes us dumber. Now you've noticed that dogs just adulate and admire you and sort of drool all over you no matter how ignorant you are and silly things that you say, and how poorly you've done and what a complete failure you are. The dog just comes slapping all over you and kisses you, and it's not good. Whereas a cat, you come home with a great award, you made a whole lot of money, the cat just glances at you and walks away because it's really not enough. I think it puts us in our place and makes our egos shrink. Of Twitter, it is estimated that somewhere beyond 31% who tweet are feline in nocturnal prowl, slyly retweeting their kind, reproducing, replicating the dark, rapacious, ever-fecund, feral soul that is the sea upon which civilization floats uneasily. For since such eloquent kitty Twitter, only the most elegant kitty litter. But if you ask Cherie, what is this? The reply is blank, blinking innocence. Meow, what's with you? Live free or die is the cat's very soul that makes of us, by contrast, fawning and obsequious beings, not unlike D, asterisk, GS. Such beauty instructs us in its own perfection, for it is beyond mere use. No work cats, watch cats, plebeian beings, but each descendant of gods as ancient Egypt honored. And how like a deity to sink teeth into a rat, a creature that squeamish mankind abhors while maintaining purest cat innocence. Sandpaper tongue, utter longing, cat love the nudge of furry hard head. But oh, where has she gone? Kitty, kitty, kitty. She may come when called, like the D, asterisk, G, but mostly she will not, for, unlike the D, asterisk, G, she has got an interior life, inscrutable, inaccessible, unpossessable. She does not aim to please, or aim at all. Her blessing is a fluke as readily withdrawn as given. Never will she do your bidding, never will she falsely flatter, nor deceive you that you much matter, beyond the reach of the hand that pets and feeds. Also, she has much busyness out of doors by moonlight. Don't inquire. But there she has gone headfirst through the plexiglass cat door to return with, dropped on the floor at my feet, a small carcass, very still. Oh, Cherie, what have you done? I also say parenthetically that my kitty brought me a garter snake yesterday. And it was really terrifying. The snake was not dead. It was still alive. Anyway, that's the end of the parenthesis. Only the cat's gift is freely given. The dog in subservience as in chains has no free will, and so, oh, Cherie, is this for me? For I will consider my cat Cherie, for whose tail twitches irritably across these keys when confronted with prose found wanting. For it is irrefutable the cat is the harshest critic of prose, candidly rejecting what has been doggedly written. This will not do at all. This is not it at all. Where the D, asterisk, G drools delight with buried mediocrity in complicity. Sometimes the furry cat sprawl obliterates the type soup altogether, for you dare not move a limb, a tail, even gingerly from the laptop. You know, you've all had this experience. Your cat's tail is on the keyboard. You can't lift it. You just have to sort of wait for it to move by itself. At risk of provoking a hiss, mew, whom are you touching, you? If I dare rise from this desk prematurely, if I dare plead human exhaustion vehemently, Cherie will dig in her claws, securing my knees with a cry, mew, where do you think you're going, you? Thus hours, days, and ages accumulate in pages, and pages into books, and books into oeuvre. Prolific, the literary judgment. That's how I've written so many books, because I actually cannot get up from my desk. The cat. I'm ready to get up after 8 hours of work, but the cat will not let me get up, and so I just keep writing until it's another novel. The very books, it is said, are not ghost but cat-written. Simenon, Colette, John le Carré, not least Hemingway, Auden, Eliot, Philip K. Dick, Borges and Burroughs and Patricia Highsmith, Jean Cocteau and Henry David Thoreau, H.P. Lovecraft and Edgar Allan Poe, parenthesis, I wish I could write as mysterious as a cat, Poe said. Twain, Bradbury, Raymond Chandler, Sartre, Sylvia Plath, and Daniel Handler. Not least Samuel Johnson, quote, but Hobbes shan't be shot. No, no Hobbes shall not be shot. Rapidly retreating into the mist of time where muse is suffused with mouse until the two are merged in mystery, cat and collaborator. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Unless you would like me to take questions? Oh, okay. My handler is telling me that I can't leave yet. So I'll be happy to try to answer any questions that you have. And thank you for not walking out. I gave you trigger warnings, and you were very stoic to say statement.
This summer, we had a class in Jane Austen, seminar for a week, and one of our members, Emily, was asking if we could find out whether you know or what you think of Jane Austen.
Well, that's kind of a profound question to ask. First of all, Jane Austen is just an extraordinary genius who not only wrote those fantastic novels, but as she was writing the novels, she was sort of creating a genre that didn't exist before. You know, now when people write novels, we have great novels. We have Phineas Wake, we have Ulysses, we have everything like, Faulkner, Thomas Mann. We have thousands of novels as models. But when Jane Austen was writing her particular novels, there's virtually nothing there. She was sort of creating a form. And of course, her sentences are like little whiplashes. I think that she's just remarkable. Now, having said that, and wanting you to know that I think she's just a great genius, I think it's very interesting to deconstruct Jane Austen, because in the perimeter of her society, in the shadows and backstage, women were they were being impregnated, many, many times. They were having babies in very unsanitary situations. They were probably dying in agony in childbirth. All sorts of awful things were happening to servant girls. Darcy, for instance, I don't want to go on about it. One could sort of write sort of the dark side of Jane Austen would be all the things she doesn't talk about, the privilege that her people exert. Emma is she's 18 years old, she's so spoiled. She winds up being married to this person who's like old enough to be her grandfather. She's so nasty to that, the young woman, I'm forgetting the name. Pardon me? No, this is the young woman who is somebody, Harriet. She had the temerity to have been born with, her father wasn't married to her mother or something like that. So it just, when you deconstruct Jane Austen and see what she took for granted, the social injustice and really the outrage that was going on all around her, not to mention the slave trade and this, that, and the other of the British Empire, all that's just not there. On the other hand, what is there is what we should look at, I suppose, and it's just brilliant. There's a double-edged answer.
How old were you when you first started writing?
How old was I when I first started writing? Well, thank you for not asking how old I am now or how much I weigh or whatever. Well, before I started writing, when I was really quite little, I think I was just so excited about the idea of being a writer that I took my Crayola crayons, I couldn't write yet, and I was just sort of drawing and scribbling on the tablets with a Crayola, and it was scribbles and scribbles. I had a tablet. It looked like a manic, sort of a moronic kind of war and peace, where whoever was writing it couldn't actually write, but just sort of scribbled these pages. So my first novels were completely unintelligible. They were just scribbles. So that was like 4 years I started to write, but since this can't be read, I mean, I can't read it myself, who knows what it was. Now, I'm not claiming that it was really like War and Peace. Please don't misquote me. I didn't actually say that. But it was sort of like the War and Peace of a 4-year-old scribbling on a tablet. Then a little later, I actually learned how to write and read, and that was kind of a revelation. So that was very exciting. So then I was actually writing real sentences. I also did drawings of cats and chickens because we lived on a small farm. I wasn't up to people for quite a while. I had some Henry Jamesian tablet novels about chickens and cats. So that's pretty young. Somebody should have stopped me, obviously. You know, this is sort of, somebody writes on the wall, "Stop me before I kill more people," or whatever. Nobody saw that sign, and so they didn't stop me. Yes.
Yes. Thank you first of all for being such an inspiration. I wanted to ask about your creative process and how much you know about the theme and plot of your writing when you set out, and how much happens during writing.
This is a question about the writing process. How much do I know ahead of time? Well, since I spend most of my time writing novels, and a novel is a form that you really have to have a sense of where you're going. I mean, you don't just get in the car and just start driving into the night, or into a swamp or a bog without any steering wheel. I mean, basically, you have to have a real sense of where you're going. So with a novel, I will have an outline. I'll have a sense of the principal scenes, and I will have the ending. You need the first strong paragraph, the title, and a strong ending, sort of a triangular structure, and that will help you write a novel. But you must never start writing a novel blindly and wait for inspiration, because you're going to wind up in a swamp. You're like 2 miles outside of town. They'll find you sunken in the quicksand, and they thought that you had gone off, for years and years you've been going somewhere, but actually you sank almost right away. Yes?
Do you have a book or a writing that is what you consider the most important, or the one that you enjoyed doing the most, and why?
Well, I think the novel that gave me the most difficulty was a novel called Blonde, which is about the sort of the private life of Norma Jean Baker, who was Marilyn Monroe. That novel was 1,400 pages in manuscript, and I remember that was very difficult to write. It was like a nightmare experience, and I would wake up in the mornings paralyzed with terror what I would have to face that day, and I was anxious all the time, and it was like more than a year that I was in that state of really intense anxiety. I remember that. And then when I finished it, some years time went by after it, I really missed it. I missed that feeling of intensity and a kind of existential misery. But I felt that what I was doing at the time was important. And when you're writing something or creating anything that seems important to you, you have a great fear that you're going to die. You feel that you're going to just somehow not finish it. And so when you're finished with that, there's a sort of anticlimactic feeling. It's like retiring. Some people don't like to retire, and I've written a lot about boxing. It's very hard for a champion boxer who's had eyes riveted upon him. He's been very, very successful, and this adrenaline rush is fantastic. Very hard for people to retire and continue with what we would call an ordinary life. So when you're not writing at that pitch of excitement, life is very difficult. I don't have that pitch of excitement that I had with writing Blonde for other things, because the subject matter, everything about it was just sort of very exciting to me, sort of like a lightning storm. And then other kinds of writing can have inspiration of a different kind, like a quieter inspiration. So it's more like looking at something and executing it, whereas the novel Blonde was more like a very powerful, like flashes of adrenaline and inspiration. So I look upon that with a sort of nostalgia. I wouldn't say maybe that was I don't really know if it's the most important book that I've ever written. I certainly felt that it was part of American history, and sort of tracing the epic of Marilyn Monroe, who I call sort of half seriously my Moby Dick, you know, taking an emblematic figure, larger than life, and just focusing a good deal of meaning upon it. So maybe one more question?
When you did your first piece about Albert, before or after you mentioned Charlie Gross, your late husband, but you didn't point out that he was a very prominent neuroscientist, and the influence of that, I assume, is in the piece about Albert. And this is an intellectual question, not a personal question, but more broadly, how did that association influence how you think?
Well, your question is sort of stunning to me. I would probably have to really think about that for a while. I've only been married to Charlie for 10 years, so in my whole lifetime, that's probably not that long. But I really confronted a different consciousness. Are you a scientist?
These days, I call myself a neurohistorian.
Oh, well, that's what Charlie was too. Did you know Charlie?
No.
Oh.
Not personally, no.
Okay.
Correspondent.
Well, you're a scientist. There's a difference between the humanist or poetic imagination and the typical mind of a scientist, where things are materialist and there's a causality, and nothing is really absolute, but it should be provisional. You should be able to replicate it. So I learned a lot about looking at the world from a different perspective, from talking with Charlie and living with Charlie and reading Charlie's books. He has a lot of history of science books. So I wrote a novel called The Man Without a Shadow, which is based upon H.M., the famous amnesiac. And I would not have written that novel without my association with Charlie Gross. He was friends with Suzanne Corcoran, who wrote the book, and you know all these people that are sort of well known here. But H.M. was, or is, the most famous amnesiac in the history of neuroscience. And Suzanne Corcoran, who was at MIT, was the person who worked with him. She experimented. She used him as an experimental subject. And I witnessed a novella called The Experimental Subject. So I'm sort of interested in the idea of the experimental, the research scientist who's experimenting maybe on another person, and then maybe becomes involved with that person. And what are the elements of scientific misconduct, and is there a clear-cut kind of ethics? As with the little Albert, at the time, it wasn't unethical, what John Watson did. I mean, they did much worse things than that, as you probably know. The father of American gynecology was a person, I'm blanking out on his name, it might have been Sims. This person experimented upon living enslaved women in the South. He experimented on them. And then he took his findings and he became a gynecologist for wealthy women. And he was anesthetics on the wealthy women. So, and then there's a infamous Tuskegee experimentation, and the Stanford prison experiment and so forth. I think to just look upon science as a very rich field of the imagination with a perspective somewhat different from the humanities, but maybe overlapping a bit, has been such a personal inspiration to me that I hope it will continue. Thank you very much.
This has been a production of Cornell University, on the web at cornell.edu.